Welcome to Meet the Author, a BTMP series where stories come to life. Each episode, we go beyond the pages to meet the voices behind the books. And because there's more publishing, there's always more to the story. Let's dive in. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Meet the Author. I'm Lynetta Allen, the host and founder of Because There's More Publishing, and we're excited to have with us today Mia Celino of the 5-Point Alignment Method. Welcome, Mia. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yes, we're so glad you're here with us so our community can get to know you a little bit more. Can you just start off just telling our community a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I was raised in a pastor's home. So my dad became a pastor, full-time pastor when I was 8. He left his career to follow the call of God on his life. So I grew up in a ministry environment. I was able to see firsthand all aspects of ministry in the church and at home. So that, coupled with my profession as a CPA, has really given me a unique look into how to manage church finances well. And so I'm excited to share that with you guys today.
Wonderful. So we're going to dive right into our questions today. What inspired you to write the 5-Point Alignment Method?
Well, I guess it would be a culmination of several things. As I mentioned before, I grew up in a pastor's home, so I have that firsthand experience with all aspects of ministry. And then when I was 19 years old, my dad hired me as the church bookkeeper. And so for several years, probably a good 30 years, I worked for the church in several different roles. So I worked through the church all through college. So as my knowledge and understanding grew, then my role also expanded in the church. So I went from being the bookkeeper to like the director of finance and finally sat on the board as the board treasurer. So that understanding and that experience, coupled with my profession as a CPA, and ultimately a deep love for the local church and a desire to help church leaders understand that financial management is not separate from ministry, it's part of stewardship. So that, and then decades of working alongside other churches, I repeatedly saw leaders who had a clear vision for their church, but struggled to connect the vision with their financial management. So through a God-given analogy, the 5-Point Alignment Method is meant to equip leaders and steward what God has entrusted them with greater confidence and intentionality. So my hope with the book was to take something like a subject that can feel overwhelming, approachable, practical, and useful for pastors and leaders.
Wonderful. And I can say personally, having read the book, that you did an awesome job just taking what could be a complex concept and making it plain, where anyone, even if they didn't have a financial background, can really understand the message that you were conveying, which leads me to my next question. How would you explain the 5-Point Alignment Method to a pastor or ministry leader who doesn't consider themselves financially minded at all?
Okay, so a strong financial management structure consists of 5 components, and that is the 5-Point Alignment Method. And you have vision, budget, processes, review, and financial reporting. But to explain it to a pastor that doesn't have high financial acumen, I would use the same analogy as used in the book, which is a car. And so I really believe that the Lord gave me this analogy to help these types of pastors and leaders who don't have a business background to understand how all the pieces of the financial management structure work together. And so if you think of the church as a car has one purpose, and that is to take you from point A to point B, to take you somewhere. Well, Scripture tells us that the kingdom of God is forcefully advancing, right? So the church also has a destination. So if you think when you get in the car, you're not going to get in the car without having an understanding of where you're going. There is some place in mind that you're going to the grocery or to church or to work. Same thing. A church needs to have a destination. The pastors and leaders need to have an understanding of the vision of the church. What is God asking the church to do? Where is he asking the church to go? That's the vision. That's the destination. Then all of the other 4 points or 4 elements of the 5-point alignment, which is budget and process review and financial reporting, can be seen as like the car's tires, right? And so a blowout in one of those tires, you're not going to get very far, right? So you need to have all 4 in order to take the church where God is asking it to go. And so for the budget, that is our roadmap. That is the plan that we're going to outline to take us from point A to point B. So like if you get in your car and you're going to go to Yellowstone National Park, you're going to have an idea of what highways and roads you're going to take to get there. You're not going to just go without a plan because you may or may not reach your intended destination. So that's the purpose of the budget, is to outline the map of how the church is going to get from where it is today to where God is asking it to go. And then, yes.
Can I just interject along those lines? I know some leaders may feel like the budget is restrictive. Can you help to sort of put their mind at ease or bust that myth?
Yes. So I just recently did a webinar on budgeting. And if there's a pastor or leader that is watching this interview and they need help with budgeting and understanding how that fits in part of the church ministry, go to my website, alliancetg.net, to watch that webinar, because it really did provide some excellent material for that. But I will say for today, there is a definition of budgeting that is from My Money Coach, and I really like it. I use it all the time in teaching, and it states it like this. Budgeting is the process of creating a plan to spend your money. Creating this plan allows you to determine in advance whether you will have enough money to do the things that you need to do or you would like to do. And I really like that definition because of this. It says that when you create the plan, which is a budget and plan can be interchanged, those terms. Budgeting has kind of gotten a negative connotation, so just swap it out with the word plan. That's all. But this definition says by creating the plan, it allows you to determine in advance whether you will have enough money to do the things that you're planning to do. And that is the part of it that brings freedom, because you know ahead of time, okay, we've taken an honest look at the revenue coming in and we have that. And then we've assessed what our plans are going to cost and we've listed that. And then at the bottom, do you have enough money coming in realistically to do the plans that you have set out to do? So that is the aspect of budgeting that really brings freedom and clarity to church ministry. So after you know the vision, after you have that understanding of where God is asking the church to go, and you create that budgeting plan to get there, then you need to have strong processes. And I like to compare that to all of the under the hood systems of your car. I mean, if you have one of those systems break, you're going to be left on side of the road, broken down with your hood up and smoke coming out of from the hood of your car. So it's important that those systems that you don't see all the time in your car, that they are still working properly. And so those are your internal controls, how you're tracking your donations from the moment that you receive it all the way to the time it is spent, your chart of account structure, how you're collecting offering and what are the safeguards around that, and all of those internal processes that we do as part of the church operations in managing the church finances. I like to compare those to the under the hood systems. Then, and so those systems need to be strong, of course, and not broken. Then it goes to the month-end review. So the month, when you are tracking and recording the debits and credits and paying bills and recording deposits, then you need to have a time of reviewing that data at the end of the month before issuing financial statements. So like if you skip that month-end review, you're not going to catch data entry errors, because data entry errors are real. Humans make mistakes. It's just part of it. So it needs to be a healthy, robust month-end review system where we're reconciling bank statements, and we're comparing our loan statement to our loan balance in our accounting software, and we're comparing our donor software to our income accounts on our statement of activities, like making sure that all of the activity was recorded accurately. Then after that month-end review, now when you go to issue financial statements, which is the fifth point in the 5-point alignment method, then you'll have confidence that the data on the reports are accurate. Without that month-end review period, you don't have that level of confidence. And so the fifth point being financial reporting, it is essential for pastors and leaders to receive accurate, timely financial reports. Financial reports are the report card of how you're doing with the plan that you've laid out to accomplish what God is asking you to do. That is the dashboard of gauges that tell you how healthy your church finances are, and how well your car is running.
And that sounds great. Everything sounds wonderful. And there may be a pastor, a ministry leader saying, I love what she's saying. I need to get this book. I need to have her to come to my church. But our problem is we only have a small staff. So what can you, if you can speak for a moment to a church who are saying, yes, we need to do everything she's saying, but how do we do it considering our capacity?
Yeah. Yes. So I would say the first thing is that the staff that they have need to get trained. And so I have also the 5-point alignment method online course, which is a 10-hour course. The material is broken down into 15-minute lessons so you can proceed through the course, according to your schedule. But it really provides that basic level accounting knowledge, and then it outlines all 5 points at a deeper level. And I find that super helpful for the pastor and bookkeeper and board members, for them all to go through the course and have an understanding. But then as far as like internal controls, it's hard to separate duties and segregate duties when you just have either the pastor and a bookkeeper. So for many years, it was my dad and I, and we're related. And as you know, for two unrelated people, but it's me and him for many years. And as I was going through college and I was learning, about internal controls, I realized I'm like, okay, we don't have proper segregation of duties. And so that left my dad and I vulnerable to accusation or just suspicion. And I wanted to make sure my love for my dad is to protect him, right? So I came to him and I'm like, okay, I'm learning this in college. We need to do something about this. Well, we couldn't afford to hire someone else, right? I mean, we were a small church at the time. So what we did was we gave one of our board members, I think it was the board treasurer at the time, access to view all of the bank activity online. So he could go in and click a check and see what the check was written to. He would see all the money coming in and all the money going out. And then at the end of the month, I would email that board member a copy of the credit card statement and the bank statement reconciled, so he could see what checks were outstanding and which ones had cleared. And so when he would review those two things, then he would email me back and say, I have reviewed and I have this question. And he might have asked a question. And I loved when he asked a question because I knew he reviewed it. And I was ready to provide an explanation for sure. But then some months he didn't have any questions at all. He was like, I'm good, I reviewed it. And I would keep that email as part of our month-end close documentation. So I could say there was a second pair of eyes outside of my dad and I that reviewed the finances in detail. And so there are ways, even for smaller staffed churches, to implement some type of safeguard to make sure that there's enough eyes on all of the transactions.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful insight and instruction. My next question is, what is one of the most common financial management mistakes that you see churches or ministries doing that they have to later correct?
So I think the biggest mistake that I've seen in churches is failing to give the business side of the ministry the attention, the care it deserves. And I understand why this happens, because churches and pastors and leaders, they're focused on caring for people and discipleship and ministry and reaching their communities. And that's what the church is there for. And financial management can sometimes feel like something that happens in the background, right? But it's important, and it's a priority. So good financial management is part of good stewardship. And that is what I aim to convey through all of these resources that Align Consulting is developing, is to bridge the gap between ministry and financial management and show how they're interrelated and they support one another. The financial side of the church provides the structure and accountability that allows ministry to operate with confidence and integrity.
Awesome. And beyond the book, how does Align Consulting Group, and you just alluded to that and shared in many other ways through your webinar, but how else can your company help churches, ministries, or even nonprofit leaders strengthen their financial management and steward their resources with greater clarity?
Well, the first thing I would think to mention is my favorite, and that's the teaching aspect. So Align Consulting Group is a full service accounting firm that's established to support churches and nonprofits with their accounting and financial needs. But we'd love to come alongside of the pastors and their teams and teach and instruct, because the ultimate goal is to empower the church to be more effective in their community. And we know as Christians that there's a time when all of this that we see today is going to wrap up, and the church needs to be ready. And from what I've seen working with churches, the finance area is a weak area. And so Align Consulting Group was birthed out of that desire to see that area for churches to be strengthened. So we offer accounting, controllership, consulting services, as well as our resources. And as we've mentioned today, our resources include the 5-Point Alignment Method booklet, the 5-Point Alignment Method online course. So the booklet lays the foundation by introducing that core framework we talked about today: vision, budget, processes, review, and financial reporting. Then the course builds on that foundation, guiding the churches step by step through practical implementation. And together, the book and the course form a complete roadmap to strengthen the church's organizational and financial health.
Thank you for that synopsis of how you can assist those that are watching and those that they may know that need your services and your assistance. How can they get in contact with you again? Are you on the company on social media, your website? Can you please share that information with our viewers?
Yes. So of course, the company Align Consulting Group is on Facebook, Instagram, and you can contact us at by clicking the Let's Align button on our website, which is aligncg.net.
Well, thank you so much, Mia, for joining us for this edition of Meet the Authors. It has been a pleasure interviewing you and getting to know the person behind the book. And we're just excited about what's in store, not only for you, but for those churches and ministries that God will afford you to be able to serve, and to bring them to a place of greater clarity in their financial management practices at church, and thus help them to steward their vision and advance their mission. Thank you again for your time. We appreciate it. And until next time, you be blessed. You've been watching Meet the Author from Because There's More Publishing. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new conversation. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing,